Lena stood at the edge of the vast, alien landscape, her heart pounding in her chest. The harsh winds of the foreign planet whipped around her, carrying with them the scent of something strange and unsettling. The sky above was dark, with jagged clouds moving across it like a storm about to break. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, cracked, and covered in strange, glowing plant life. It wasn't like anything she had ever seen before. She was alone. The other cadets had already been dropped off in different parts of the planet, each one facing their own test. But this was hers. She could feel the eyes of her superiors on her, watching from a distance, ready to judge her every move. They had made it clear that this was a test, and the stakes were high. She looked down at the small, flickering holographic display in front of her, which had materialized from her wrist communicator. It was flashing a single, cold number, 2%, survival chance. Lena couldn't help but laugh. She had been prepared for something difficult. But this was madness. Her chances were slim, barely enough to hope for anything. Yet, she didn't feel fear. Instead, she felt a strange sense of excitement. 2% survival. She knew this was just a game, a challenge put in place by those who thought they could control her fate. What will I do with the other 98%? She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. The question hung in the air like an unspoken dare. The message was clear. The challenge was not just to survive. No, survival was the least of it. It was about proving herself against all odds, against the galaxy's harshest test. The holographic display shifted, showing a countdown, 6 hours until life support runs out. The clock was ticking, and Lena had no choice but to move forward. She didn't wait for instructions or commands. She had long since learned that following orders wouldn't get her anywhere. This was her fight, her challenge. The others, they had their own battles. But for Lena, this was the test of her life. The ground beneath her feet was unstable, as though it had been torn apart by something large. Strange rock formations stretched upward like jagged teeth, casting shadows on the barren landscape. In the distance, Lena could see movement, shapes, maybe figures, maybe creatures she couldn't yet understand. The air was thick with tension. The wind carried strange, low-frequency sounds, like something was alive and watching her. Lena moved forward, her every step cautious yet deliberate. Her mind raced as she scanned her surroundings. 2% survival. What did that even mean? Was it about how long she could last? Or was it something more? A test of mental strength, physical endurance? She wasn't sure yet, but she was going to find out. Hours passed, and the landscape became more and more alien. The sky darkened, and the temperature dropped sharply. She could feel the cold biting into her skin, and yet, she refused to stop. Every step was a challenge, every decision mattered. She couldn't afford to waste time. Suddenly, a loud noise pierced the silence, the screech of something large, something fast. Lena's heart skipped a beat as she spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the weapon strapped to her side. But there was nothing, no creature, no threat, just the wind, illusions. Her mind was playing tricks on her, or maybe it was the stress. She couldn't be sure. But the sounds kept coming. Now there was a rumble from below, a deep growl coming from beneath the surface of the planet. The ground trembled, and for a split second, Lena thought the earth itself was going to swallow her whole. She had no idea what lay beneath the surface, but she knew it wasn't something she wanted to meet. A chill ran down her spine. The survival chance wasn't just about her physical strength or mental fortitude. It was about something deeper. Something hidden beneath the surface of this planet. Something that she had no control over. The wind picked up, howling like a distant animal. In pain, 2% survival. It wasn't just a number anymore. It was a reality. Lena knew she had to keep moving. She couldn't stop, couldn't afford to rest. Every moment was critical. But the more she moved forward, the more she felt like she was being followed. Was it just the wind? Or was there something else, something unseen, stalking her every step? She paused for a moment, listening closely. The air felt heavy. The sounds from earlier returned, now louder, more distinct. She turned quickly, scanning her surroundings, but saw nothing. Nothing but the dark landscape, the strange rocks, and the eerie silence. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw something move. It was fast, too fast for her to react. She turned, trying to focus, but by the time she did, the shadow had already vanished. Her heart raced, and her breath quickened. Something was out there, and it was watching her. Lena's mind raced. What was this place? What was the test? The wind howled once more, and a voice echoed in her mind, a whisper. Just out of reach. Survival wasn't the real challenge. And then the ground beneath her feet shifted again. This time, there was no illusion. This time, it was real. The countdown continued, ticking louder with each passing second. As Lena felt something heavy in the air, the test had begun, and she had no idea what she was really up against. Lena's heart pounded as the ground beneath her feet cracked open with a deafening roar. She barely had time to react before a massive tremor sent her sprawling to the ground. The surface of the planet seemed alive, as though the earth itself was rebelling against her presence. She scrambled to her feet, dust and debris swirling around her as she surveyed her surroundings. The once stable ground was now a jagged mess of fractures and cracks, like the planet was slowly falling apart. Her survival instincts kicked in, pushing her to move quickly, to get away from whatever was causing the tremors, but there was nowhere to go. The planet was vast, and every direction felt equally dangerous. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. This wasn't the time to panic. She needed to think, to percent survival. The words echoed in her mind again, like a cruel reminder of just how little chance she had to make it out alive. Lena knew she had to get moving, but her body screamed for rest. She hadn't slept in days, and her mind was beginning to fog with exhaustion. But there was no time for rest. If she stopped now, she'd be giving in to the test, and Lena didn't. Given, not ever. The holographic display on her wrist flashed again. 6 hours until life support expires. That meant she had less than half a day to figure out how to survive, and the chances of that were slim at best. But Lena wasn't like the others. She wouldn't give up. Not yet. With a deep breath, she pushed forward, eyes scanning the unfamiliar terrain. The strange plant life around her seemed to pulse with an otherworldly glow, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The air was thick with a heavy, metallic scent, like the entire planet was steeped in some ancient mystery. She felt as if the very planet itself was watching her, judging her every move. Her path led her to a narrow ravine, the sides lined with towering, blackened cliffs. She hesitated, the instinct to turn back creeping up on her, but she refused to give in. She had to push forward, no matter the risk. As she descended into the ravine, the air grew colder, the temperature dropping sharply. She could see her breath in front of her as she moved deeper into the narrow passage. The walls of the ravine closed in on her, the sky above becoming nothing more than a thin line of light. It felt like she was trapped in a world of shadows, cut off from everything and everyone. Suddenly, she heard it again, that low, rumbling growl from earlier. Her pulse quickened as she spun around, but there was nothing. Just the eerie stillness of the ravine, pressing in from all sides. Lena felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She wasn't alone. She could feel it. Something was out there, something waiting for her to make a mistake. The growl came again, louder this time, closer. It was no longer just a sound, it was a warning. Lena moved quickly, trying to stay as quiet as possible. She had no idea what was following her, but she couldn't afford to find out. Not now. Not with only 2% survival to her name. She reached the bottom of the ravine, where the ground leveled out into a small, open area. For a moment, she thought she might be safe. The growling had stopped, and the oppressive weight of the ravine seemed to lift. But then the ground trembled again. This time, it wasn't a simple shake. The earth cracked open beneath her feet, sending a shockwave of dust and debris into the air. Lena barely had time to jump before a massive creature shot up from the ground, its body covered in thick, black scales that gleamed in the faint light. Its eyes were glowing with a yellow, predatory intensity, and its teeth were long, sharp, and dripping with saliva. Lena's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary creature. It was a predator, and it had been waiting for her. The creature's massive claws scraped against the rocky ground as it advanced toward her. its growl vibrating through the air. Lena's mind raced. She had no weapons, no tools, nothing but her own wits and strength. She took a step back, then another, trying to keep her distance from the creature. It wasn't fast, but it was powerful, and if she made one wrong move, she knew it would be the end. Her heart was hammering in her chest as she backed into the ravine wall. The creature still stalking her, its eyes locked on her every move. Lena's thoughts raced. There had to be a way out. She couldn't die here, not like this, suddenly. The creature lunged, its jaws snapping shut just inches from her face. Lena's heart stopped, her body frozen in place, but at the last possible moment, she dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly bite. The creature growled in frustration, circling around her, looking for another opening. But Lena had no intention of giving it one. She darted forward, using the momentum of the creature's failed attack to her advantage. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed a sharp rock from the ground and used it to strike at the creature's underbelly. The beast howled in pain, stumbling back, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The creature was enraged now, its movements faster and more erratic. Lena didn't have much time. She had to find a way to defeat the creature or escape. The clock was ticking, and survival was slipping further and further away. What would she do with the other 98% as the creature lunged at her once again? Lena's thoughts were drowned out by the roar of battle. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps as she dodged the creature's latest attack. It was too fast. She could feel its hot breath on her skin, could see the gleaming teeth that were just a second away from tearing into her. The battle wasn't one she could win with sheer strength alone. She needed strategy, and she needed it fast. The creature lunged again, its massive claws slashing through the air. Lena barely managed to roll out of the way, the claws grazing her arm as she moved. Pain shot through her, but she didn't have time to think about it. She had to keep moving. The creature was relentless, its hunger growing with every passing second. It wasn't just hunting for food, it was hunting for a kill. She stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the uneven ground, and the creature pounced. The air around her seemed to thicken, each moment stretching longer than the last. Just as it closed in on her, something clicked in her mind. Survival wasn't just about fighting back. It was about using the environment. She wasn't going to beat this creature with her fists, but she might be able to outsmart it. Lena's eyes darted around the ravine. The walls were steep, and the path ahead was blocked by sharp rocks and thick roots. There was no escape, but there was one thing she hadn't noticed before: a thin, fragile-looking bridge of vines and branches stretching across a deep chasm. It was barely visible in the dim light, hidden by the shadows of the ravine's high walls. If she could just get to it, she might be able to put some distance between her and the creature. With the beast closing in, Lena made a snap decision. She turned and ran toward the bridge, ignoring the pain in her side as she moved. The creature's roar echoed behind her, and she could feel the ground shaking with each heavy step it took. It was close, too close. Lena reached the bridge just as the creature's claws scraped the ground behind her. She dove for the vines, her hands barely catching the edge as she pulled herself up. The creature's growls turned into frustrated screeches as it tried to follow, but it couldn't get past the narrow space. For a moment, Lena thought she was safe. She had the advantage. She had used the environment to her benefit. But as she crawled across the fragile bridge, a sudden noise made her freeze. The growl. It wasn't coming from behind her anymore. It was coming from below. Lena looked down, her stomach churning with dread. Beneath the bridge, in the darkness of the chasm, she saw the glowing eyes of more creatures. They were watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. There were dozens of them, maybe more, each one larger and more menacing than the last. She couldn't afford to panic. Her hands gripped the vines tighter, her fingers slipping slightly as the tension in her body mounted. She had to move, and she had to move fast, but the bridge was unstable, the vines creaking with every shift of her weight. She could feel it starting to give way. Just as the first of the creatures jumped at the bridge from below, Lena pushed herself forward, ignoring the terrifying sight of the creatures swarming beneath her. Her heart was pounding, and every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to find a safer way. But there was no safe way. There was only the path ahead, and the choice to keep moving. With every step, the bridge creaked louder, but Lena refused to slow down. The creatures were getting closer. She could hear them scrambling up the sides of the chasm, their claws scraping against the stone. One wrong move, and she would fall straight into the waiting jaws below. The bridge wobbled beneath her, and Lena's heart skipped a beat as she heard the snapping of vines. She gritted her teeth and pushed on, her legs burning with the effort. Her survival instincts kicked in, urging her to go faster, to not stop, no matter what. Just as she thought the bridge couldn't hold much longer, she reached the other side. She made a desperate leap, landing hard on the solid ground. The bridge behind her collapsed, the weight of the creature's attack finally breaking it apart. For a moment, Lena lay there, panting heavily, her body aching from the effort. She had made it, but she wasn't out of danger yet. The creatures were still close, and she had only bought herself a little time. Her mind raced. She had escaped the immediate threat, but the planet itself seemed to be working against her. The odds were stacked higher than ever, and the clock was ticking down on her life support. She was running out of time. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. In the distance, she saw something strange, a structure, tall and looming. In the shadow of a massive mountain, it looked like a ruin, ancient and covered in vines. It was her only hope. Her wrist display flashed again. 3 hours until life support expires. Lena got to her feet, pushing the pain aside. She didn't have time to rest. The ruin in the distance was the only thing that could offer answers, maybe even a way out of this nightmare. But the question still lingered in her mind. What was this test really about? As she began her trek toward the ruin, the ground shifted once more beneath her feet. The planet was far from finished with her. But she wouldn't stop, not yet. The creatures still lurked. Behind her, the shadows of the unknown closing in. And in the back of her mind, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. But who or what was watching her? The ruins were getting closer, and the answers she sought were waiting. But would they be what she expected? Or would they change everything? The suspense built with every step she took. She was about to find out. Asterisk. Lena's feet crunched against the dry, alien soil as she moved forward, her mind fixated on the looming ruins in the distance. Every step felt like it took her further away from safety, and deeper into the unknown. The eerie stillness of the planet surrounded her, broken only by the distant growls of the creatures she had narrowly escaped. She didn't dare stop. Not yet. The 2% survival burned in her mind. It wasn't just a number anymore. It was a reminder that she wasn't supposed to make it. She was supposed to fail. But Lena refused. She'd survived the first wave, the creatures, the treacherous terrain. She had defied every expectation. She wasn't going to stop now. But the journey to the ruins felt longer than it should. The shadows of the alien landscape seemed to stretch, pressing in on her, wrapping around her like a thick fog. Her body ached. Her muscles burned from the effort. She was running on pure instinct now. Survival wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about something deeper, a will to prove that she could beat the odds, that she could rise above whatever this planet threw at her. With each step, the ruins drew nearer, but the tension in the air only grew stronger. Lena could feel the ground shifting beneath her, the faint vibrations of something moving far beneath her feet. Was it just her imagination, or was the planet itself reacting to her presence? She paused for a moment to catch her breath, her eyes scanning the horizon. There was no sign of the creatures now, but she knew they were still out there, watching, waiting for her to slip up. The countdown on her wrist display ticked down relentlessly. 2 hours until life support expires. The ruin ahead was massive, its walls jagged and ancient, covered in vines and strange symbols she couldn't understand. The architecture was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a fusion of advanced technology and long-forgotten designs. It was a place of power, but also of mystery. The more she looked at it, the more she felt like she wasn't meant to be here, like something was waiting for her inside, something was drawing her in. Lena took a cautious step forward. She had no idea what lay inside, but the feeling of being drawn toward it was undeniable. It felt like destiny, like the ruin was calling her, beckoning her to unlock its secrets. She approached the entrance slowly, every step measured. The air seemed to hum around her as she reached the massive stone doorway. The symbols on the walls flickered in response to her presence, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to pulse in rhythm. With her heartbeat, there was no turning back. Now she pushed the door open, the heavy stone grinding against the floor with an unsettling screech. The inside of the ruin was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of ancient dust and something metallic. The temperature dropped as soon as she stepped inside, sending a chill down her spine. Lena's eyes adjusted to the darkness as she took in her surroundings. The walls were covered in strange, alien writings and diagrams. They depicted creatures, planets, and what looked like advanced machinery. But there was something else, something she couldn't understand. The images seemed to be alive, shifting and changing as she moved past them. She continued forward, her footsteps echoing in the empty space, her eyes searching for anything that might explain why she had been brought here. She had no idea what she was looking for, but she felt an overwhelming sense that she was getting closer to the truth. As she walked deeper into the ruin, she found a large chamber, its walls lined with intricate carvings and strange symbols. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it, something was glowing. It was a small, crystalline object, pulsating with a strange energy. Lena felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if it was calling her. She stepped forward, her hand outstretched, drawn to the object like a moth to a flame. As soon as her fingers brushed against the crystal, the room seemed to come alive. The walls trembled, the symbols on them glowing brighter, and the air around her hummed with power. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the ground beneath her shifted, and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. She pulled her hand back, heart racing. The crystal was no ordinary artifact. It was a key to something far more important than her survival. But what had she just unlocked? The hum grew louder, and the walls began to crack. Lena's pulse quickened as she turned to leave, but it was too late. The entrance she had come through was now sealed shut, and the chamber was filling with a strange light. The air was thick with energy, and Lena could feel the room closing in on her, the temperature rising rapidly. "No," she whispered, her mind racing. "What's happening?" The ground began to shake again, and the ceiling above her groaned, as if it were about to collapse. But there was nowhere to run. The light from the crystal grew brighter, blinding her for a moment, and then everything went dark. For a moment, Lena was lost in the void, suspended in nothingness. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her, her body suspended in midair, her mind overwhelmed by the power surging around her. Then a voice, low, ancient, powerful, "You are chosen." Lena's eyes snapped open, but she was no longer in the chamber. She was standing in a vast, empty space, surrounded by a swirling darkness. The voice echoed in her mind, and she felt the weight of its meaning. Chosen for what? She thought, her voice trembling, but the answer didn't come. Instead, the ground began to shift beneath her once more, and she felt herself falling, plummeting into the unknown. The voice echoed once more, fading as she fell deeper into the abyss. "You have only just begun." The suspense was suffocating. Lena had no idea what was happening, what force was at play, or what the planet had in store for her next. But she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close to understanding. Not when everything was about to change. Lena's body slammed into the ground with a force that left the wind knocked out of her. She gasped, her vision spinning as she tried to orient herself. The darkness around her was thick, suffocating. For a moment, she couldn't tell where the ground ended and the sky began. The fall had disoriented her, but that voice, still lingered in her mind, echoing through the blackness. "You have only just begun." She pushed herself up from the cold, alien soil, her limbs aching from the fall. The ground beneath her felt solid, but somehow unnatural, like it was alive, constantly shifting. The air around her hummed, charged with an energy she couldn't fully understand. Where was she? How far had she fallen? The darkness stretched on endlessly, as if the very fabric of this place defied the laws of nature. And yet, she could feel the faint pull of something, some unseen force that beckoned her forward. Lena's wrist display flickered weakly, the countdown still ticking away 1 hour until life support expires. Her body was drained, her mind was numb, and her chances of survival were slipping away with every passing second. But she couldn't afford to give in. Not now, not after everything she'd already survived. "You are chosen." The words resonated in her mind again, but they only left her with more questions. What did it mean to be chosen? Was this part of the test, or was there something more? Lena was no longer sure what to believe. The challenge had already broken her, twisted her perception of reality, but now, it was pushing her into an entirely new territory, a place she couldn't have anticipated. She stood, brushing the dirt and dust from her clothes, her eyes scanning the oppressive darkness for any signs of life, but all she saw were faint, shifting lights, distant, glowing orbs that flickered, like stars on the edge of a dying sky. It was then that she realized she wasn't alone. In the far distance, Lena could see shapes moving, dark figures, barely perceptible in the gloom, slinking across the landscape like shadows. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Were they the creatures from earlier? Or was this something new? She couldn't risk getting too close, not without knowing what she was up against. But there was nowhere else to go. She had to press on. Lena took a step forward, her boots making no sound as they met the ground. The eerie silence around her was broken only by the faint hum of energy in the air. As she walked, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, moving like liquid, undulating in a way that made her stomach churn. With every step, the air grew heavier. The lights in the distance began to pulse in time with her heartbeat, drawing her in like a moth to a flame. She didn't know why, but she felt compelled to go toward them, as if something in the core of her being told her that the answers lay just ahead. The shadows moved faster now, rushing toward her with an unnerving speed. She didn't have time to wonder what they were. Instinct kicked in. She sprinted, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her legs burning with every step. The pulsating lights grew closer, their brightness blinding in the midst of the darkness. And then, as she rounded a jagged corner of rock, she came to an abrupt halt. Before her stood a massive structure, a tower of sorts, made of the same alien material as the ruin she had explored earlier. The walls of the tower shimmered with a strange, blue light, reflecting the lights around her. This was no ordinary building. It pulsed with energy, the entire structure humming as though it were alive. The path leading to it was littered with strange, glowing symbols etched into the ground. They seemed to move under her gaze, shifting and changing, as if the very earth beneath her feet was speaking to her, but in a language she didn't understand. Lena hesitated, uncertainty flooding her mind. This was it, the destination she had been unknowingly drawn toward. But what was waiting for her inside? What lay at the heart of this mystery? The voice, the strange creatures, the energy that seemed to radiate from this planet. It was all coming together. But was she ready? The pulse of the structure seemed to answer her question. It was now or never. She stepped forward, her feet crunching against the symbols as she approached the entrance of the tower. It loomed before her, dark and imposing, and she felt its pull as if it were pulling her soul toward it. As Lena crossed the threshold, the air shifted. A sudden chill washed over her, as if the structure itself had come alive. The walls around her glowed brighter, and the symbols in the ground pulsed faster. She moved deeper into the tower, her footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Then, she saw it. At the very center of the room stood a pedestal, and on the pedestal lay the object, the key, or at least, what she had come to think of as the key to understanding all of this. It was a crystal, much like the one she had found earlier, but far larger. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, and as Lena drew closer, she could feel a surge of energy course through her. For a moment, she paused. This was it. This was what the planet had been leading her to. She reached out, her fingers trembling, her mind swirling with a mix of fear and anticipation. The crystal hummed in response, as if it had been waiting for her touch. As her fingers brushed against its surface, the entire room seemed to shift. The walls began to crack, the ceiling above her groaned, and the crystal's glow intensified. Lena staggered back, heart pounding in her chest. Then the voice spoke again, louder this time, resonating from deep within the tower itself. You have unlocked the next stage. The trials have only just begun. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. The challenge had already pushed her to her limits, but now, it seemed like it was only the beginning. What was she about to face? What had she unleashed before she could process the weight of the words? The ground beneath her feet shifted again, and the walls of the tower began to crumble. Lena didn't have time to think. She turned and ran as the tower began to collapse around her. The tower was crumbling, its massive walls groaning in protest as they cracked and splintered apart. The ground beneath Lena's feet trembled violently, throwing her off balance. She barely managed to stay upright as pieces of stone and debris rained down from above, crashing to the floor with deafening force. The once shimmering crystal on the pedestal pulsed, its glow growing brighter as the tower's destruction accelerated. "The trials have only just begun," the voice echoed again. Deeper now, like a command, a force that could not be denied. Lena didn't have the luxury of questioning it. She turned and sprinted toward the collapsing entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. The tower was alive, its destruction a manifestation of something much greater. The energy that had flooded the room was now shifting, distorting the very space around her. The walls were no longer solid. They warped and bent like liquid, as though the tower itself were being sucked into a vortex she couldn't see. The entrance was collapsing, the way out shrinking by the second. The air was thick with dust, and the ground cracked open in new fissures, swallowing anything in its path. Lena's breath came in short, panic bursts. But there was no turning back now. Her only chance was to escape before the entire structure collapsed in on itself. As she neared the entrance, a massive chunk of rock fell in front of her, blocking her path. She swerved just in time, her body twisting in the air as she leapt over the obstacle. Landing hard on the other side, she gritted her teeth against the pain. There was no time to waste. The rumbling intensified, and the tower's destruction seemed to accelerate. "You're too late," the voice rang out again, this time distant, as if the planet itself were speaking to her. "The true test has begun, and now you are part of it." What did that mean? What was happening? Lena didn't know, and she didn't have time to figure it out. She pushed forward, her legs burning, her breath ragged. Behind her, the ruins of the tower were collapsing, the ground beneath her feet shifting as if it were trying to swallow her whole. She stumbled into the open, the world around her spinning. The once gleaming structure had fallen into chaos, a crumbling mass of rock and energy. The sky above was a violent shade of red, as though the atmosphere itself was burning away, and the planet's surface cracked and shifted with each passing second. Lena barely registered the movement out of the corner of her eye before it was upon her. A creature, unlike any she had seen before, leaped from the shadows. Its body was covered in thick, armored plates, and its glowing eyes locked onto her with a predatory intensity. It moved with lightning speed, its massive claws cutting through the air, reaching for her. Lena had no choice. She ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the creature's deadly swipe. It hissed in frustration, its long tail snapping like a whip. The beast was fast, but Lena had learned to rely on her instincts, to trust her ability to move when the world around her moved. Too fast. But this was different. This wasn't just a creature. This was a test, a part of whatever trial had been set in motion the moment she stepped onto this planet. The creature lunged again, but Lena had already anticipated its move. She sidestepped, grabbing a jagged piece of debris from the ground and swinging it with all her strength. The sharp rock collided with the creature's side, drawing a sharp screech from it. The beast staggered back, but it wasn't enough to stop it. It recovered quickly, more vicious than before, eyes blazing with fury. She could feel the tension building, the adrenaline surging through her body. She had been through so much already, but now, with the tower's destruction behind her and the world literally falling apart, she had to make her move. This creature was part of something larger. She couldn't let it stop her. She grabbed another piece of stone, holding it in both hands. As the creature charged at her once more, she swung with every ounce of her strength, aiming for its head. The rock collided with a sickening thud, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. It roared in pain and fury, but still, it advanced. Lena's mind raced. She needed a way out. The creature wasn't going to stop, and she couldn't keep fighting. Like this, She darted to the side, using the rubble and debris for cover, trying to stay out of its line of sight. Suddenly, something caught her attention in the distance. Through the dust and smoke, she saw a faint glimmer, another structure taller than the tower, glowing with the same strange energy. It was far off, but it was her only chance. Lena turned, running with everything she had, ignoring the pain in her muscles. The creature let out a deafening roar behind her, its claws scraping the ground as it chased her. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep this up, but she didn't have a choice. The countdown on her wrist continued to tick down, a cold reminder of how little time she had left. Her feet pounded against the rocky ground, each step taking her further from the creature and closer to the glowing structure. The beast's growls echoed in her ears, but she pushed forward, her mind focused on one thing: survival. She could see the structure now, the walls pulsating with energy, a beacon in the chaos of the planet's final moments. But as she neared it, something strange began to happen. The ground shook again, and the structure began to fade, flickering in and out of existence like a mirage. Lena stopped, her heart racing. As the world around her began to warp, the air grew thick with energy, the atmosphere vibrating with a force she couldn't comprehend. The creature's growls faded, the crumbling landscape around her seemed to freeze, and then, in a blinding flash, everything went dark. The next thing she knew, she was standing in an empty void, the sounds of the battle and the planet's destruction gone. Everything was still, silent. And then, the voice spoke again, louder, clearer. "You have unlocked the final trial. Welcome to the end of your journey." Lena's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't over, not yet. Lena's heart pounded as she stood alone in the void, the silence pressing in on her from every direction. Her surroundings were now a vast expanse of nothingness, a black canvas that stretched endlessly. There were no creatures, no crumbling towers, no hostile forces. It was as if everything she had experienced up until now was some kind of dream, a test, perhaps, but nothing more than a trial to reach this moment. The last words of the voice still lingered in her mind. "You have unlocked the final trial. Welcome to the end of your journey." But there was no peace here, no solace in the stillness. Lena felt the weight of those words bearing down on her. She had come so far, survived so much, but now, here in this empty place, she had no idea what awaited her, no direction to follow, no enemy to fight. She was alone, and the silence seemed almost mocking. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely a tremor in the oppressive silence. "What do you want from me?" Her words echoed back at her, fading into the emptiness. For a long moment, there was no response, no sign of what was coming next. Lena's mind raced. Had she failed? Had she misunderstood the entire trial? Or was this just another part of the test, a deeper, more insidious phase she hadn't anticipated? Then, without warning, the silence was shattered. A low hum began to vibrate through the air. It started faintly, like a distant whisper, but it grew steadily louder until it shook the very ground beneath her. The void around her flickered, and the blackness began to shift. Something was happening. The walls of nothingness seemed to fold inward, and the temperature dropped suddenly, sending a chill through her bones. The energy that surged around her was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was raw, primal, and undeniably powerful. "This is the final test." The voice, distant yet everywhere, filled her mind again, calm but firm. Lena's body stiffened. This was it, the final test. She had no idea what it was or how it would unfold, but the very air around her was charged with the promise of something massive, something that would either break her or change everything. Before she could prepare herself, the ground beneath her feet cracked open. A massive fissure split the void, and from the depths, an immense figure began to emerge. Towering over her, its shape was blurred, a silhouette against the dark backdrop, but Lena could feel its presence like a weight pressing against her chest. A being, or something that appeared to be a being, emerged from the crack, its form shifting in and out of focus. The creature was enormous, but its features were almost impossible to comprehend. It looked like something between a living machine and an alien god, covered in iridescent armor that shimmered with an energy far beyond human understanding. Its eyes glowed like twin suns, and its movements were impossibly fluid, As if it existed on a plane of existence Lena could not yet fathom. It looked down at her, its voice ringing in her mind. You have passed the trials of survival. But this is the final judgment. Lena stood frozen, the weight of its presence pressing down on her. This was what she had been brought here for, to face judgment. But who was judging her? What was she being judged for? What is this? What do you want? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. The figure did not respond immediately. Instead, it raised its hand, and a wave of energy surged toward her. It wasn't an attack, but the force was undeniable. The energy wrapped around her, pulling at her, testing her will, her strength. It was as though the creature was examining her, seeing into the very core of her being. She could feel her heart race as the energy flowed through her, testing her in ways that words could never describe. The weight of the trials she had already survived pressed in on her. The survival challenge, the creatures, the destruction of the tower, all of it had been part of this. The creature before her, this force of unimaginable power, was the final step, and now it was waiting to see if she was worthy. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on her breath. She had come this far. She had survived impossible odds. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving that humanity, she was worthy. The creature's voice filled her mind again. But this time, it was different. You were chosen to prove your worth, not to me, but to yourself. The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her with an overwhelming force. It wasn't the creature that mattered. It wasn't the trials, the tests, or the odds stacked against her. It had never been about any of that. It had been about her, about what she was capable of when everything seemed impossible, what she could accomplish when the world, or the universe, tried to break her. The energy around her began to pulse in time with her heartbeat, sensing with her every breath. She had survived. She had made it through everything. And now, she was here, facing the final challenge. But this was not a test of strength. This was a test of who she was. I am ready, she said, her voice stronger now, no longer trembling. For a long moment, the creature remained silent. Then, slowly, it nodded, and the pressure around her began to ease. The glowing eyes softened, and the being stepped back, its form slowly dissipating into the shadows. The void around Lena began to shift once more, the blackness giving way to light. A soft hum filled the air, and she felt a warmth spread through her. The creature, the trial, everything began to fade, leaving her standing alone once more. But she was different now. The trials had tested her in ways she could never have imagined. She had fought, she had survived, and she had faced the impossible. And now, she was free. The voice echoed one last time in her mind, softer than before. You have passed. And with that, the darkness lifted. Lena stood in the light, her heart steady, her mind clear. She had made it through. She had faced the end and emerged stronger than she could ever have imagined. But the journey was far from over. The end, or was it just the beginning?